I'm gonna climb in.
Yeah, babe.
Oh my.
You ready for this? We'll see. So I mentioned earlier that the vision, the tentative vision statement we have, is an open and loving community of spiritual adventurers, inviting all people to experience their divinity in an empowering space of unconditional love. So, of course, today we're talking about spiritual adventures. And it was interesting that after we had come up with a draft of this, I was having dinner with my family, and the question got put out to the table, what's the most adventurous thing that you've ever done? And it was cool, because I've actually done some pretty adventurous stuff. When I lived in Florida, and I was into scuba diving, I once did a night dive on a natural shipwreck that was in 240 feet of water, which anybody who knows about scuba diving understands that, first of all, you shouldn't go to a natural shipwreck because it just sank and all the stuff is still on it. And you definitely shouldn't do it at night. And furthermore, you shouldn't really dive deeper than about 120, 130 feet. So that was kind of adventurous. When I was 17, I found myself in a blizzard driving from Hanover, New Hampshire to Waitsfield, Vermont. That was pretty adventurous. I didn't plan that one at all. I was prepared. But it was not intentional under any circumstances. I'm into rock climbing, so I didn't want to wear a wetsuit today, so I figured the metaphor
Thank you.
would be the climbing gear. Yeah, that's just, you're welcome for not taking any further than just the visual you had in the privacy of your own mind there. And I once went climbing in El Dorado Springs, which is outside of Boulder, Colorado. And I came back, and my climbing instructor said, "Oh, you went to El Dorado Springs, did you climb the Bastille Wall?" Like, no. No, because nobody told me ahead of time I should have climbed the Bastille Wall. We climbed on the other side of the canyon from there. So a year or so later, I was in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I went climbing in Squamish. And I hired a guide, and the guide said, "What do you want to climb?" And I said, "When I go back to Philadelphia, what are people going to ask me if I climbed?" And they said, "The Chief." Well, the Chief is a 3,000-foot granite face. So I climbed the Chief. Not the whole thing. The bottom part of it. And those are all wonderful adventures and great stories to tell. And there are other adventurous stories of things that I did in the world that are fun to talk about. But the most adventurous thing I have ever done was to turn away from the world around me and acknowledge the power of the truth of who I am, tap into that infinite presence that's inside of me, and let that love out. That's the most adventurous thing I've ever done. I found this New Thought teaching when I was in my early 30s, and it was life transforming. It was life transforming for me because I'd always thought this. I'd always believed this stuff, but I didn't have anybody who had a context for it. I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. I certainly didn't know that there were songs and books. And so I started learning more and more about it, and I continued to dive in deeper and deeper and deeper. And I'm now a New Thought minister in Philadelphia, co-founder of a spiritual community. And if you were to look at my high school yearbook, there's nobody would have guessed this. There's nobody would have said, yeah, Bill's going to be a minister. But that's the spiritual adventure that I'm on. And we're all on that spiritual adventure. And it's, of course, as always, it's a good news, bad news story. The good news is you are on the precipice, on the brink of a brand new spiritual adventure. And there's the bad news. You got to take a leap. You've got to do something that you haven't done before. You might be doing something that's as scary as climbing a 3,000-foot granite face, or diving 200 feet deep, or driving through a blinding blizzard. And it's not that those things are dangerous. It's that those things are out of the ordinary. The thing that makes them adventures is that they're new. So, are you ready to do something new? I'm going to figure yes, because that's why you're here. So everybody here, in one way or another, is ready for something new, ready for something different, ready to be even more connected to that bright light of love that's available and indwelling everything, and ready to shine. I always love having Breen do the readings, especially if it's out of the Science of Mind textbook, because he's very precise with the words. It's like, what exactly does this mean, the willingness of spirit to share itself through me? Isn't spirit always willing? Well, yeah, of course. Spirit is willing. Whatever the question is, spirit is saying yes. So spirit is always willing. What makes spirit unwilling? Us. Our unwillingness. Sometimes we sit there wrapped up in fear, wrapped up in the concern of what would happen if this goes wrong. What if I take complete responsibility for my life, if I own the fact that I am this divine power creating a new experience, and the experience sucks? Then what? There's nobody left to blame. That's awful. How can I let go of that? Well, you don't have to do it all in one leap. It's not a chasm that you have to jump to the other side of. It's a path that you get to walk down. So a big piece of the spiritual adventure is once you are ready to say yes to the spiritual adventure, that's when the training begins. Because I didn't go out and the first time I went rock climbing, went to the chief and go 3,000 feet up. There was a process that was involved in that. I learned the basics. I learned a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more, and I got myself to the point where I thought that I was ready for that. And there's even more details and stories about the way that I surrounded myself with equipment, with expertise, with guidance, and with the safest possible environment that I could. Climbing is a really interesting sport if you've never been involved in it. They do not use the word safe. Nobody ever says safe climbing. You want to be as safe as you can when you climb, but climbing inherently is not safe. And usually what you worry about when you're climbing is not actually climbing. Very few people are seriously injured climbing. More often than not, it's falling or having things fall on them. So, in that sense, if you want to be specific about the word, climbing itself is very safe. Standing on the edge of a 3,000-foot cliff, maybe not so much. So that's where the metaphor comes in. Okay, so I got the rope here, and this is a little piece of climbing rope that we'll just use for explanation purposes. Because when I go climbing, I'm not just going to scamper up this, forget about 3,000 feet. I don't want to climb in the gym more than about 10 or 15 feet off the ground without having some kind of rope, something to hold me up. Because if in fact there's a minor mishap, a slip, which is easy to do, I don't want it to turn into a catastrophe. So we use a rope. And I don't just bring a rope with me, I actually have to know what to do with the rope. So if anybody's ever been climbing, you know what a retraced figure eight is. Okay? And that's the knot that we use to tie ourselves into the harness. Why do we use a retraced figure eight? Because somebody figured out that that's not going to come loose. What in the world does that have to do with your spirituality? Where are you going to learn the techniques for making sure that you're safe as you go through this process, or as safe as you can possibly be? And that's what the classes and the workshops and the fellowship here are about. Because I can talk about this a lot, and we can get the science of mind in our mind, and that's not where it lives. It lives in our heart. So the reason that we go to class and we take Beyond Limits, or we go to the Four Agreements class that we've been in, is to learn to just automatically take care of ourselves. So, see, what I did is I tied a retraced figure eight and then I put the backup knot on it, which is 2 half hitches. Now, I didn't have to look at that, I didn't have to think about it, I didn't have to wonder about it, and that's because I've been doing it for a long time. And that's the point. Everybody can do a foxhole prayer. Everybody can get to the point where everything seems to be going sideways in their life, and it's like, oh my God, please help me. And it's that gasping, exasperated, this is the end of the rope prayer. Do they work?
You bet.
Yeah. Some of the most motivated, inspired people are the ones that are getting shot at. But you don't have to wait for that moment. None of us has to wait for that moment. What we can do is we can train ourselves, we can condition ourselves so that when the moment comes when we want to do a prayer, it's not an exasperated, oh my God prayer. It's part of what? Part of the natural way that we deal with life. Because if there is, in fact, this infinite power and presence, this divine creative essence that's flowing through everything, that's flowing through me and through you and through all of it, and I have access to it, then what I want to do is practice. I want to practice having access to it. So that before the bullets are flying, I'm able to do prayers for stuff like the girl to call, or the parking space to be available, or the meter maid to not come down the block after my meter expires. I mean, these are all completely trivial, and God doesn't care. God responds equally to something that we think of as big or something that we think is small. Because there's no difference in God. You got to imagine, the biggest thing that possibly happens in your life is happening somewhere in a localized area, in one portion of one planet, in one solar system, in one galaxy, and there are billions of galaxies. So the biggest thing that we can possibly imagine is still nothing. Or next to nothing. So does it matter if it's next to nothing or next to nothing? Yeah, probably not. That's where our spiritual arrogance comes in. Where we mistakenly believe that we are so important that God is going to be happy or unhappy based on what happens to us. Nice thought. Kind of egomaniacal. So, what we do when we're training and we're preparing for our spiritual adventure is we learn how to do what? Anyway. We learn how to pray. Everybody say that out loud. We learn how to pray.
We learn how to pray.
Yes, we learn how to pray. And not an, oh my God, please help me kind of prayer. God, please don't let them take my house.
Yeah.
Which is a wacky prayer in so many different directions. God, out there, please, I'm begging, which means I don't have any power myself. Don't, which is where I'm looking for what I don't want to have happen. Let them, again, a power outside of me, take my house. Well, who are they? Where's the house going to go? And who am I asking? If we turn that around, the way to do that prayer is, I know that divine God power and presence is inside of me, creating my perfect place to live, and I'm grateful for it. Bam. Oh God, please don't let them take my house. It sounds so much more powerful, but it's not. It's not. In the first one, we're putting all the power outside of ourselves. And in the second one, we're claiming our power. We are claiming the truth of our spiritual power. Please, please learn how to do that and make sure that you do it on a regular basis. There's a little guide for how you do it. It's the 4 P's. Anybody remember what the 4 P's are? Powerful.
Present.
Personal, present tense.
Positive.
And positive. Right. We're going to pray, it's positive. We're going to pray for what it is that we want. We're not going to pray for what we don't want. Because God don't know no.
Yes.
Right, yes. What we're looking to do is get to yes. The answer is going to be yes, so let's ask the question so that when the answer is yes, we get what we want. Oh God, I don't want to live in poverty. What does God hear? Live in poverty. Yes! And we learn how to do that, to be positive and powerful and personal and present tense. We're not going to say, I want to someday be happy. Because what are we saying when we say that? I'm not happy. So, rope in, you know, and make sure that you're connected. Make sure that if there's a slip or a fall, the infinite is there to back you up. Because you can do that. I mean, it's definitely possible to do that, even if it seems scary. Here's a little piece of show and tell. This is it's over here. Has anybody been rock climbing? Yeah. You know what you use that for? Yeah. You find a little crack in the rock, you jam the sucker in, then you clip the rope to it, and that's what you hang on. Good? Now, having me explain that to you doesn't seem like a great idea, right?
Nope.
No. Everybody say it together. Nope. Nope. Doesn't seem like a good idea. And once you understand how it works, once you understand how strong and how resolute the rock is. I mean, if I have a little tiny crack in a granite face, that's all I need. This is going to connect me. In fact, the smaller this is, the better. The bigger ones tend to be more aluminum and less granite. Granite works better. But knowing that, and having experienced that, and having taken the responsibility for going up to the top of the cliff and putting these little things in and saying, it's safe! And having Rev Dave climb up the rope while I'm holding it, it's a difference between the theory and the practice. So the invitation is to practice. So prayer is tremendously powerful. What's another way that we're able to connect in our spiritual practice? Meditation. Why in the world would that be important? Anybody?
It's receiving mode.
Yeah. If in fact there's an infinite intelligence, and we'll just go take this to theoretical now. If there's an infinite intelligence, that divine God presence that knows everything, that is everywhere, that shares itself as everyone, if that divine power exists and is accessible, how am I going to be aware of what it is suggesting to me? I gotta shut up. I gotta go quiet for long enough that the little voice is gonna say, put that in the crack to the right. Because the still small voice is not something that's specialized and only some people get to hear it. The still small voice is something that's available to everybody at every time. And what we need to do is identify that we are candidates for hearing what the still small voice is telling us. And sometimes it tells us things that are really empowering and really supportive and make us feel great. And sometimes it tells us stuff like, I know you're going to look goofy, but put on the helmet. Because if there's something coming my way, I want to be wearing the helmet, even if it looks goofy. So we get to accept the guidance for doing that which we would normally want to do anyway. And also for doing the stuff that wouldn't necessarily be in our frame of reference. So I didn't really want to get stuck or have to drive 2 hours in a blizzard when I was 17. 17 PS is when I first had my driver's license. I got my driver's license in maybe May or June, and this was in December. But I seemed to have survived it, and that was okay. I was prepared, I knew what I was doing, the car was capable. It was still scary. So don't set out to have one of those adventures. You don't have to be one of those people who says, oh, the hurricane's coming, let's go surfing. I've heard that surfing is fun, and that there's a lot of nice waves during a hurricane. That's not the time you want to go surfing for the first time. I have friends who love to go surfing. They surf all winter long on the Jersey Shore, which is insane, but they don't need a beach badge. And because they know what they're doing, because they're prepared, they're able to go and enjoy that circumstance. I don't have a 6mm wetsuit. I don't want to go surfing when it's 34 degrees out. So isn't that perfect that I don't have that big wetsuit? But for people who want to do that, it's about being prepared, understanding what the adventure is that we want to go on, and then do everything that you can to make sure that you're going to be safe doing it. So there's a third form of spiritual practice that we engage in around here, which is life visioning, which is kind of a combination between prayer and meditation. It's about actively setting an intention to get a message from Spirit, to get that inspiration, to get that vision about what's next and what's new. When Reverend Maria Kelly from Agape was here talking to us, she told us the most important part about life visioning. If we do a life visioning process and we get an inspiration of something that we've already been inspired about, that's not Spirit. That's not life visioning. That's us thinking that our idea was good, or maybe filling in our to-do list. The spiritual adventure is always creating something new. Sometimes it's completely brand new. Sometimes it's a little bit of a nuance, a little bit of a direction, a little bit of guidance on something that we're going to do differently. But the spiritual adventure begins when we say, I'm on a spiritual adventure. And then you wind up in a class. And then you wind up with some gear. My wife is convinced that the only sports that I like are the ones that require a lot of specialty luggage. The backpacks to keep the climbing gear in, and the duffels to keep the scuba gear in, and the racks for the tanks, and forget about skiing. And Joe, you're laughing at me. You have a horse.
Your clothes is clothes.
When we set out on our spiritual adventures to decide, yes, I am on a spiritual adventure and I am now going to do everything necessary to prepare myself so that I can not only survive this adventure, but I can thrive through it, I can grow through it, I can experience something new and wonderful through it. Because that spiritual adventure is the invitation for us to create something awesome and new and wonderful in our lives. So do that. Be on a spiritual adventure. Let's go climbing, let's go diving, let's have some fun. Let's be godlike presences, because you deserve it. So it is.